Professor Mike Hulme, our guest, he's a professor in East Anglia, England, born in London. So when you walk through London and take a look at the people and say, who's doing what about climate change here? Are you concerned about it here?
I'm concerned about climate change, but I'm concerned about the welfare goals that climate change might get in the way of. So again, what I'm saying is that stopping climate change is not the ultimate objective.
Okay, that's a strange thing to say, but...
The ultimate objective is something beyond climate change. It's about quality of life, it's about public health, it's about taking people out of poverty, it's about protecting ecosystem services. So I'm concerned is whether climate change is getting in the way of us achieving those welfare goals. And in some cases it is, in some cases it's not.
What do you make of rabid environmentalists? Some. And what do you make of contrarians? Some. What are the benefits for them?
Well, what is quite interesting...
Talking about it and protesting it or not, or denying it.
I've debated with contrarians, and I've debated and argued with environmental advocates. And what I find quite interesting is that if you take sort of those polar extremes, if you like, of the climate change debate, both of those extremes, they actually quite like to keep the focus on the science. Is the science correct? Is the science credible? Are scientists, cooking the numbers? Because both of those extremes feel that, well, science somehow determines or drives policy. So if we can win the battle about the science, then we've actually won the battle about the policy. So both of those extremes want to keep the battle on the decimal points on the graph, or is the human influence 82% or 47%? Both extremes like to keep things there because they think that if we can win this battle of science, we've then automatically won the policy debate.
But science is sometimes ahead of policy, or science is ahead of the law, so if you could just say, okay, if we don't have the numbers quite right, that's not the big deal. Is that what you're saying to me? If the numbers aren't quite right and you don't know the exact
because
numbers...
they're never going to get right. I mean, we're dealing with a complex system. The Earth system is extraordinarily complex, and actually scientific knowledge is never going to be precise enough to give us these numbers to the nearest point. Keeping the focus there is actually a distraction, and it's stopping policy innovation happening. But both of these two extreme positions, the contrarians on the one hand and the environmental extremists on the other, actually want to keep the battle on the science.
I got it. What you don't want are refugees from a land that has no water, land that is turned into a desert, to have to go to some other countries. You want to keep people in their place, if you can. I'm not against immigration, but you know what I mean. So if you could say, if down the road we don't do something about that, forget about worrying about whether your heart's ticking. There'll be other things you're going to deal with.
There are other things to deal with, and again, this is why I say that the question is climate change getting in the way of dealing with these other things? I used to, in my early career, I did a lot of work in Northern Africa, on the margins of the Sahara Desert, looking at semi-arid and pastoralist communities, people who are living quite close to the margin. And the questions for those sort of people was really about sustainable livelihoods. It's about actually finding ways of adapting to a rainfall that is very variable, goes up and down from year to year. It's finding good adaptive strategies to survive. And it's not actually about trying to somehow think that we can control the weather or to control the rainfall. They wouldn't understand that notion of trying to control the climate or to control the weather. What they're concerned about are sustainable livelihoods and strategies that will help them to sustain life in these marginal environments.
And do you think the last battles will be fought over water?
I don't think they are going to be, no. I think a lot of evidence suggests that really about these water issues, these trans-boundary water issues in the Middle East, in North Africa and in Southeast Asia, that actually water generates quite a lot of cooperation between states. There are just as many examples of water scarcity inducing cooperation as inducing conflict. In fact, probably more examples of how cooperation emerges when a resource is scarce than how it engenders conflict. And that again flies in the face of some environmental narratives that you may hear. That people say, "Oh, well, you know, the next world war is going to be fought over scarce resources." That actually isn't borne out by the evidence.
So, if the scientific evidence, and you say it is, suggests it is strong enough for action, what action do we need to take?
Well, I would say
here and in Germany and South Africa.
I'm not wanting to pronounce what you here in BC should or shouldn't be doing, but what my argument would be is that don't put all of your effort into one overarching framework. It was quite interesting that Canada, the government of Canada withdrew from the Kyoto Protocol at the last round of negotiations.
Yes.
And I think that was a good and brave step to do, because the Kyoto Protocol is not going to achieve anything for the world here. What one has to find is that you've got to find smaller parts of the problem that can be tackled through smaller coalitions of interest groups. And the example of the indoor cookers in India is a good example of this. Smoke that emerges from these indoor cookers, it burns your lungs, it causes premature deaths, and it also deposits itself on glaciers and ice sheets, and it contributes to global warming. So here's an area eradicating black soot from indoor smoke cookers in India. That is something that's achievable.
Yes.
It actually can be done in a relatively short period of time. The technology is there. The cooperation between India and some of the other development agencies is there. That can be achieved in a relatively short period of time.
Sure, and we can put, as I said before, the solar fridges, they can carry vaccines to people who don't have any access, and the vaccines spoil if they're not in a fridge. Well, the fridges are polluting, some of them, but not the solar fridge.
Yeah.
So why not? Or even in North America, if you're going to have a fridge, have a solar fridge. I know it sounds simple.
But some of these short-term interventions which have clear public health benefits or other types of welfare benefits, and at the same time they will reduce a little bit the carbon dioxide and the other greenhouse gas emissions that are warming the climate. It's small incremental solutions rather than one big overarching framework that is utopian and ideal but will never be achieved and will never accomplish anything.
Is there a world leader today who gets it, who's ahead of the pack, so to speak? An Angela Merkel,
well, the European
Cameron,
Union,
a prime minister somewhere.
I don't see the European Union getting this story. They have invested so much in the Kyoto Protocol that European leaders don't want to backtrack from that. I actually think in many ways the more creative leadership in this area around climate change may well come from developing southern nations, countries like Brazil, countries like India, who recognize it's not all about stopping climate change. It's about other things. So I would suggest, if you're looking for leadership in the world today around climate change, then look outside the usual suspects. Don't look at Europe, don't look at North America. Look at Brazil, look at Indonesia, look at India.
Okay, so if Tata, the Indian car company, makes a car, they make a car that works with the environment, because there will be a lot of cars in India.
Yeah, and they've got a big problem with air quality in some of their big cities. I was there a couple of years ago in Delhi. The municipal authorities in Delhi had taken the unilateral decision that they were going to change the entire vehicle fleet in Delhi from gasoline to liquid petroleum gas. So this was a radical decision taken by one municipality. Overnight, it improved the air quality of Delhi. You know, the little particulates, improved those dramatically. It also, at the same time, reduced the CO2 emissions from that one city. So there's a case of a municipality taking leadership.
Think locally, act globally.
Yeah.
Nice to see you and to meet you.
Thank you.
You'll be speaking this evening, Why We Disagree About Climate Change, and it's really interesting. You're here with a bunch of scientists, right? 8,000 or something scientists hitting this city.
The big American Science
Association. You'll speak tonight. It goes from 5 to 7. I doubt your speech will be that long.
No, I hope not.
Okay, thank you. Professor Mike Hulme.